A very good morning to you. Firstly, I just want to get a sense of what's the current mood in Iran.
Well, the current mood is kind of joyous. I mean, there's the mood is a reflection of the attack last night, and the feeling seems to be among most people that Iran made good on its promise to respond to the assassination of Qasem Soleimani.
Naeem, I guess the big question is, why did President Trump have to take out General Qasem Soleimani now and in this way? I mean, was General Soleimani an imminent threat to the United States? And if so, where is the proof?
Well, they haven't provided any proof because I don't believe that there is any proof of his being an imminent threat. Yeah. I mean, certainly in some ways he has been a thorn in the side for the Americans for a good few years. In other ways, he's been a partner of the Americans in Afghanistan to get rid of the Taliban, in Iraq, even setting up the governing council after the American occupation, etc. But I think in a broad general sense, the Americans did regard him as an obstacle. He has been responsible from Iran for setting up various of the Iranian operations outside of Iran. That's what the Quds Force, the unit that he heads, does. So he was in charge of the operations in Syria, the liaison with Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iraq, etc. So from that perspective, clearly he was a problem for the Americans, but there's no evidence that there was any kind of imminent threat, as they're suggesting. I mean, the reason that he's using the imminent threat thing is because that's the condition on which he is legally allowed to launch an attack without talking to Congress.
Yeah.
And hence the opportunistic use of that.
So Iran firing more than a dozen ballistic missiles at two Iraqi military bases housing US troops. No casualties have been reported. I think that fact is material. Would you say this is a proportionate response to the killing of General Soleimani?
Well, the Iranians would like to claim that it's proportionate. I mean, the reality is that Soleimani was a very senior general. He was in the power structure in Iran, probably number 2 or number 3. And so proportionate would be, I suppose, assassinating Mike Pence or Pompeo. But the Iranians went for an option that they believe can be sold as being a proper response, while doing it in a way that doesn't invite further attacks from the Americans. The Iranians have been in a bit of a corner. They had to respond to Soleimani's assassination, but they had to respond in a way that won't invite further American attacks, either on the economy or militarily. And so the option that they chose last night is less than proportionate, in my opinion, but enough to satisfy the pressures on them from the Iranian population.
In terms of their attacks, maybe in terms of their strategy, we know, we're just looking at a tweet now from the Iranian foreign minister saying that we do not seek escalation or war. But the fact that no American lives were lost, do you think that it was a miscalculation or it was a deliberate strategy on the part of Iran to calm the situation down? Because by all accounts, they needed to respond, as you said, to the killing of General Soleimani. But as we look at this tweet, have said they're not seeking war with America.
I think that the target was very carefully chosen to ensure that there weren't any casualties. It was an Iraqi base where American soldiers were being housed in part of the base, the main one, Ain al-Assad, and the other one as well. But it was chosen in a way and at a time where there wouldn't be casualties. And we know that the Iranians, I mean, I've seen some commentary saying that, well, maybe their technology is so bad, etc. The reality is that the missile technology is pretty good. Just a couple of months ago, they fired missiles at the Aramco installation in Saudi Arabia. and it was a precision hit. So I think that they chose the target carefully. They wanted to ensure there wouldn't be any casualties, which would mean that they could do it without any big response from the Americans, and I think they've succeeded in that.
Before Iran's retaliation, yesterday US Defense Secretary Mark Esper was saying that they are not looking to start a war with Iran, but they are prepared to finish it. Is this it from Iran? Do you think there will be further strikes?
No, I mean, Iran's view is the same. They don't want to start a war with the US. But if the U.S. brings on a war, they will fight it. And Zarif's tweet that you quoted earlier on makes it clear that for them, they've done what they needed to do. And if the Americans don't go any further, that's it. I mean, he said, we don't seek escalation of war, but we'll defend ourselves against any aggression. So as far as the Iranians are concerned, we heard the similar kind of sentiment in statements from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which Soleimani was part of. That if the Americans don't respond, they will take it that the attack last night was proportionate, was the full and complete response to Soleimani's assassination.
You know, I was listening to a former State Department senior advisor yesterday. He was speaking on CNN on a war with Iran. And he was saying that, you know, this engagement or this war with Iran would make Afghanistan and Iraq added together, multiplied by 2, look like child's play. So is President Donald Trump playing with fire here?
That depends on what he does, what he announces tonight. I mean, I agree with that sentiment. If the United States decides, if Trump decides when he wakes up in his morning, if he decides to retaliate against Iran, launch strikes in Iran, then I think the Iranians will make good on their threat. Their threat was that if the Americans retaliate, they will launch strikes against Haifa in Israel and Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. And that will be the beginning of a region-wide conflagration that will see the good part of that Middle East region destroyed. And into the battle will come the various partners and proxies that Iran has, whether in Syria or in Iraq, in Lebanon, etc. So anything that goes in that direction, I think that person that you're quoting is correct. I don't think Trump is going to go in that direction, however.
You know, for many people, Naeem, the first time they heard of General Soleimani was when he was killed. You know, many in Iraq, in Iran, call General Soleimani commander of the hearts, the soldier of Iran. The US, as you know, calls him a terrorist leader. How would you describe him, very briefly?
Well, he was. He was a great strategist and a great soldier. Clearly, in the Middle East, there's split sentiment about him. In Iran, he's greatly loved. I mean, his popularity was probably more than the president and the supreme leader put together. But in the Arab world, the sentiment is split. There are many, for example, in Syria, who blame him for the killings of 500,000 Syrians by the regime there. Many Iraqis who blame him for Iran's involvement in Iraq. But there are just as many or more that have the opposite opinion and regard him as a great hero, as someone who was a brilliant strategist, put together a whole resistance axis, as they would call it, across this region, and who was able to thumb his nose at the Americans. So I think that opinion is split in that way. Certainly in Iran, he's a great hero.
Look, it's a story that we have to keep a close eye on because it indeed has international repercussions. And Naeem, we thank you very much indeed for your perspective.